was in the limelight last year was the issue of entry of women into Sabarimala temple. Now, why was this issue in news? There was a Supreme Court judgment related to it. Now, what was the judgment about? And what has happened post the judgment? This is something that we are going to focus on in this session. Now, first of all, why it was in the news? Now, there is a temple of Ayyappa, Lord Ayyappa, Sabarimala temple. This temple prohibits the entry of women who are in the menstruating age. In the age category, 10 to 50 years. So women who are in the age category 10 to 50 years, they cannot enter into Sabarimala temple. Supreme Court declared this practice as unconstitutional. This particular custom is unconstitutional. So that was the news. So women who are in the age category 10 to 50 years, they also have equal rights to enter into this temple, Sabarimala temple. So this was the final judgment of Supreme Court. After that, some women tried to enter, but there was a lot of protest. They were not allowed to enter into temple. And finally, in 2019, January 2nd, 2019, two women, two activists, they were able to enter into the temple. And after that, the Kerala government, they have stated that more number of women were able to enter into it. But it was not an easy ride. There was a lot of protest from the side of the public, from the side of the temple as well. In fact, women entered the temple on January 2nd. After that, there was a purification exercise by the temple authorities. They have carried out some rituals so that the temple will be purified, which had become impure because of the presence of women. So, what is the broader issue here? That is what we are going to understand. So, the first thing, where is this temple? What is the history of this temple? The Sabarimala temple, it is considered to be the abode of Lord Ayyappa. It is located in the Periyar Tiger Reserve in Patanamathitta. The Sabarimala temple is considered to be the abode of Lord Ayyappa. It is located in the Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala. Now, Lord Ayyappa is considered to be a celibate god, male god, celibate god. Now, what is the history? What are some of the legends related to him? Now, it is said that Lord Ayyappa is the son of Shiva and Vishnu. Because of union of Shiva and Vishnu, Lord Ayyappa was formed. Now, Vishnu had taken a female avatar and which resulted in this union. That is the reason Lord Ayyappa is also referred to as Harihara Putra. Hari, Vishnu, Hara, Shiva, Harihara Putra, Lord Ayyappa. But there are some other legends to him as well. Now, sometimes it is said that the origin might be dated back to the pre-Aryan phase. So in pre-Aryan phase, there are some legends which talk about Lord Ayyappa. Maybe during the Aryan stage, Lord Ayyappa might have been included in the Aryan pantheon. That might have been the case as well. He is referred to as a celibate god, but there are some other instances, not in Sabarimala though, which talk about his having wives. Not in Sabarimala. In Sabarimala, it is considered to be celibate god, but there are some other instances in other places which say that he has wives. Apart from that, there is another Muslim Islam angle to Lord Ayyappa as well. It is said that Lord Ayyappa had to fight an enemy, and when he had to fight the enemy, he also had to take the help of a Muslim, Vavar. So now also, near this particular temple, there is a mosque dedicated to Vavar. And when the pilgrims, they go to Sabarimala temple, they first visit the mosque, and the mosque has a pond. From that pond, water, the pilgrims collect the water. Apart from that, some Muslims officiating the mosque, they will put the ash on the forehead of these pilgrims who go to visit the Sabarimala temple. So there are lot of linkages here Vishnu cult, Shiva cult, Islam, multiple linkages are there. So that is the reason it is quite colorful history. It has got a quite colorful history. Now, what is the reason why women in the age category 10 to 50 years are not allowed? The legend says that Lord Ayappa is a celibate god. So women in the age category 10 to 50 years might impact his purity. So that is the reason women in this age category are prohibited. This particular custom had been challenged in 2006 by an association, India Young Lawyers Association. Now, Indian Young Lawyers Association, they filed a petition in 2006. They are saying that this custom, which restricts entry of women, is violative of the right to equality under Article 14. And it is also violative of Article 25 of the Constitution. Article 25, freedom of religion. So, female worshippers, their right to worship is violated by this custom. They are not allowed to worship Lord Ayappa. So their rights to worship, their freedom of religion is being violated. So Article 14 and Article 25 is being violated by the custom in Sabarimala temple. Now, there have been some arguments put forward in favor of exclusion of women from the temple premises. Now, what are some of the arguments? First thing, from the side of the state, the argument put forward is the temple priests, they are the final legal authority. The Travancore Devaswam Board, it is the final legal authority to manage Sabarimala's temple administration. So they should have the final call. Another argument put forth is Article 26. Now what does it say? Article 26 says that Article 26 is basically a guarantee to religious denomination to manage its own religious affairs. So according to Article 26, the religious denomination can decide for its own, it can manage its own affairs. So on those grounds, it can make laws, it can make its own rules, which can prevent women from entering into temples. Apart from that, another provision is the Rule 3B of Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Rules 1965. So this particular rule, Rule 3B, protects the customs of Sabarimala temple. So Sabarimala customs are protected by it. And this particular law allows exclusion of women from public places of worship if the exclusion is on the basis of custom. So if the custom says that women are excluded, and this particular rule will protect the custom. So indirectly what will happen? It will protect the custom that women are excluded. So the exclusion of women is considered to be a custom, and these customs are protected by these rules. So these are the arguments given forward. The state says that it is the temple priests who are the final legal authority. Article 26 says that religious denomination can manage its own internal affairs. And section Rule 3B of Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Rules. According to it, the customs of the temple are protected, and one of the customs is women should be excluded. Now, what are the bases on which the Supreme Court gave its judgment? What were the major dilemmas here? What are the major things that needs to be understood here? First thing, whether Rule 3 of the Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Rules, it permits religious denomination to ban the entry of women. Does this practice violate Article 14 and Article 15.3 of the Constitution? So these rules, are they violative of Article 14, equality, Article 15.3? So positive discrimination in favor of women, are they violative of this? Second thing, whether the practice which prevents entry of women, whether this practice is an essential religious practice under Article 25, right to practice, profess, propagate your religion, whether this practice is an essential religious practice under Article 25. Next thing, whether this exclusionary practice on the basis of some biological factor. Menstruation is a biological factor. Those who are in the age category 10 to 50, they're considered to be of menstruating age. Menstruation is a biological factor. Whether exclusion on the basis of a biological factor amounts to discrimination. Whether this kind of provision is violative of the Article 14, 15 and 17 of the Constitution. Apart from that, whether Sabarimala temple has a denominational character, whether it can be considered to be a denomination. So all these things needs to be analyzed, and all these things were analyzed by the Supreme Court and it gave its judgment. So what were some of the key points of the judgment? First thing, now patriarchal practices which involves exclusion of one gender in favor of another, which infringes upon the fundamental freedom to practice and profess one's religion, and which denudes women their freedom to worship, which has been guaranteed under Article 25. These kind of patriarchal practices should be unconstitutional. So if there are patriarchal practices which is excluding one gender, if it is infringing upon someone's fundamental freedom to practice, profess one's religion, which is preventing someone to worship, it should be considered unconstitutional. So this is part of the judgment. Apart from that, devotees of Lord Ayappa, they should not be considered a separate denomination. They do not have a separate religious identity. They are Hindus, they are part of the larger Hindu religion. So, temple's denominational right to manage its own internal affairs, that is Article 26B, is subject to state's social reform mandate under Article 25(2)B. That means state can make any law that can open public institutions, public Hindu institutions, to all classes of Hindus. So here there are two fundamental rights. On one side, the right for a denomination, a right for any temple to manage its own internal affairs. But at the same time, there is another right, the right of the state to bring about reforms so that these kind of institutions can be accessed by larger section of the population. So whenever these two rights are there, the state's social reform mandate will be given precedence. So that is the reason the state's mandate to bring about reforms so that women can also be part of it gains precedence over its right to manage its own internal affairs. So state can make any law that opens a public Hindu institution to all classes and sections. Under these classes and sections, they are including women of the menstruating age 10 to 50 years. Apart from that, the Supreme Court judgment also says that exclusion of women in the age category 10 to 50, the menstruating age, this particular exclusion, this particular practice should not be considered as an essential religious practice. That is not an essential religious practice. Apart from that, they found that the Rule 3B of Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Act, this is violative of the Constitution, and it is not only violative of the Constitution, it is also violative of Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Act. Why it is violative of this Kerala Hindu Places of Public Worship Act? Because Section 3 and Section 4 of this Act, they say that we need to open these spaces, or all these religious spaces should be more inclusive. Now, on one side you are saying it should be made more inclusive, and on the other side you are trying to restrict people. So, Section 3, Section 4, they want the institutions to be open to all section of Hindus, but Rule 3B, it is preventing women from entering these places. So that is the reason Rule 3B is not only violating the Constitution, it is violating the Parent Act as well. So that is the reason it should also be struck down. So on these grounds, it should be struck down. First thing, it is supporting patriarchal practices, which is restricting women's right to freedom of religion, their right to worship. Secondly, devotees of Ayyappa, they should not be considered, they are not having a separate identity. Temple's denominational right should not be given precedence to the social reform mandate under Article 25(2)(b), that will be given precedence over Article 26(b). Exclusion of women is not a fundamental essential religious practice, and Rule 3(b) is also extra constitutional, and it is also violative of the Parent Act. Apart from all these arguments, Justice Chandrachud put forward some more interesting arguments. Justice Chandrachud is saying that physiological characteristics, the different biological characteristics of women, should not be an hindrance towards enjoyment of someone's rights. Physiological characteristics of a woman should not have a bearing on the entitlement guaranteed under the Constitution. So, biological attributes of a human being should not come in the way of someone's enjoying someone's rights which have been guaranteed by the Constitution. Rights are here. Biological characteristics should not deny someone his or her rights. So that is also very important. So menstruation should not deny woman her dignity. Menstruation should not deny her rights which she is legally entitled to. Menstruation should not be the reason for the stigma she has to bear. So menstruation should not lead to someone's denial of her fundamental rights. He is in fact equating menstruation to a form of untouchability. This denial of entry to women who are in the menstruating age, is a kind of untouchability. And untouchability is prohibited under Article 17 of the Constitution. Article 17 prohibits. So this kind of practice that you cannot enter into the temple if you are menstruating, it is a type of untouchability. And he is basically going to the Constituent Assembly debates, and he is saying that the makers of our Constitution, they had deliberately not given a precise definition of untouchability. They had not given a very specific meaning of untouchability. The main reason is they wanted to have untouchability to have an expansive meaning. So that is the reason untouchability should not just be considered in terms of caste, it should also be considered in terms of gender. Women who are menstruating are being considered untouchables in this scenario. They are denied entry into temples. So that is the reason this particular custom should be considered to be a custom of untouchability, and it should be scrapped out because there is no space for untouchability in our discourse. It is violative of our fundamental rights. So Justice Chandrachud looked at this particular custom from this angle as well, from the angle of untouchability. And women should not be denied their rights on the basis of some biological factor. Every woman has to go through menstruation, so it's very natural, it is biological, it is fundamental. They should not be denied their constitutional rights just because of this. So this is Justice Chandrachud. So in this particular judgment, there was also a dissenting voice. The minority opinion, the dissenting voice came from a woman judge, a female judge. So Indu Malhotra had a different opinion. She had a dissenting opinion. So we should also look at the dissenting voice, what she is saying. Indu Malhotra says that in a secular polity, we should go for harmonization of different competing claims to fundamental rights. So harmonization of this thing should happen. And Indu Malhotra is saying that we must respect a religious denomination's right to manage its own internal affairs, even if these affairs might sound illogical, even if they sound irrational. And she says that the devotees of Lord Ayyappa should be considered as a separate religious denomination. And she says that the state must respect the freedom of various individual sects to practice their faith. And she says that the fundamental rights of equality that is guaranteed under Article 14, they cannot override Article 25, right to practice, profess your religion. And she is also saying that this Article 17 of the Constitution should not be applied here. The Sabarimala custom is not violative of it. She feels that the Article 17, untouchability, related to untouchability, should be applied only for the case of caste, should not be extended to gender. So the opinion, the viewpoints of Indu Malhotra were different, but it was a minority opinion. 4-1, only one judge was of this particular opinion, and she was a woman judge. So that is the reason we should also note her ideas. So she was the one who was in favor of women's entry restriction into Sabarimala temple. So this is about the judgment. The majority opinion was that women should be entered, women who are in the age category 10 to 50 should be allowed entry into the Sabarimala temple. Now what happened after that? On January 2, 2019, two women in the age category below 50 years enter into Sabarimala temple, and it is something which which was not a cakewalk. There were a lot of protests. Women were not allowed to enter, but these two women, they entered into the temple with the help of, they were given protection, police protection was there, and secretively were able to enter. 3:45 a.m. That is the time they entered it. But after that also, there was a lot of protests, and in fact, during this period, whenever there were protests, there were also casualties. Human lives were also lost in these protests. And immediately after this incident, on 2nd January, the temple priests, the temple administration, they called for purification of the temple because it was felt that the temple got defiled. So one thing you should note here is the law is saying that women can enter. The Supreme Court judgment was about that. But people themselves, they are not ready for it. Those who are the devotees of Lord Ayappa, those who are part of the temple administration, they were not in favor of it. So what you are trying to do here is you are trying to use law to bring about social change. But people themselves have not changed. So it can lead to conflict. So whenever you are trying to bring about social change, ideally you should try to bring the change from the bottom. If you are using law to bring about change, so that is a top-down approach. From the top, you are bringing about some changes. And whenever you are going for these kind of things, whenever you are using a top-down approach, there can be conflicts, and that is what is happening here. People themselves have not understood the different provisions of the law. People themselves are not that open-minded. They still hold back to the customs. Always keep this in mind that changes at the level of ideas, changes at the level of values takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you are using law, the change happens overnight. Law changes overnight. So today there is a judgment. From tomorrow onwards, the laws are different. But people's mindset will not change at the same rate. And that is what is happening here. That is the reason there was a conflict. There was a lot of protests. But good part is the state tried its best to provide security to these women. The state tried its best to protect women who wanted to enter into the temple. And on 18 January 2019, the Kerala state government informed the Supreme Court that already 51 women in the menstrual age had entered the temple. Though there were some other reports which pointed that this number might not be exactly the same. Some reports said that many women were not actually women, some of them were men, and also they pointed out that some of the women who the government claimed were in the age category of menstruating age were actually quite old. But whatever be the case, some women have definitely entered the temple, but the protest still continued. Later on, in the beginning of February 2019, there were some reports that the Kerala temple administration of Sabarimala, they were in favor of allowing women to enter into the temple premises. But whatever be the case, there has to be a more sustainable solution. Till now, not many women have entered, and those women who have entered, they have entered it secretively with police protection. Need to find a more sustainable approach for it. Have to ensure protection of the right of freedom of religion of women. So this is about the Sabarimala dispute, the Sabarimala temple entry issue, and what was the judgment, and what is the main issue here. Law versus society. If you are trying to bring about change with the help of law, and if you are trying to bring about change at the level of society, what is the difference here? So this is it. And one thing I would like to point out here is the issue of entry into the temples. It has been there for a while. It is not just about women's entry into temple. Temples have been the place of different kind of struggles. In the past, Dalits were also denied entry into temples. So the entry into temples for Dalit was obtained again after a lot of time, after a lot of protest, after a lot of efforts. And in fact, now also there will be some temples in which Dalits might not be allowed easy access, easy entry, or there might be discrimination. But thing is, but the good part here is, whatever was the scenario in the past, at least that has changed to some extent, and that has changed for the better. The same thing we can also understand here. Now women are denied, but over a period of time, things might change the way it has changed for Dalits. So this is about the issue related to entry into Sabarimala temple. Thank you.